Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of WSL Pure One Ocean. I'm your host, I'm Reece, and I hope this finds you healthy and safe wherever you're listening or watching. When we start a show, I'm usually so excited to get into it with our guest. I'm just kind of frothing to get right into it, and I blast past the intro, and I figure everyone listening already can think about, the connection of whatever One Ocean is meant to be. We as individuals can all think of our individual connection to our One Ocean, right? It's like, oh, I know that I go out and I surf and I recreate and that's what I get from it. Or it's a place of, solitude or solace. For some, it's a place where we work. For some, it's a place we study. For others, it's a provider of food, probably for all of us. And for all of us, it's a way that we get oxygen, the way we breathe. And when I say all of us, I really, really mean all of us. That is not just for people who live along the coastline. It's not just for surfers. It is truly all of us. We are all we don't all just have a connection as individuals to the ocean. We are connected to each other through the ocean, the ways in which it regulates the weather, our climate, our oxygen we breathe. And so when we say all, we really need to talk and think about everyone. And that means not just surfers, etc. It means everyone, people of color, indigenous communities, etc. Like all those different people who have such incredible different backgrounds, who have every right and connection to the ocean as anyone else, need to be a part of this movement. And that's what environmental justice is all about. And, to this day, ocean conservation has not been that diverse. And I don't necessarily think that that's intentional. It's more just a symptom of the systemic issues at large. And that needs to change. And that needs to change broadly across many different institutions. And so it's really cool that the sustainability movement is moving forward with the environmental justice movement together, because we need everyone on the same page. We need to think about the rights of our indigenous and communities and people of color. So this is all being brought to the forefront by coronavirus. There have been a couple recent articles highlighting how the coronavirus pandemic is not just a health crisis, it is an environmental justice issue. People of color and communities, Black and brown communities, are being disproportionately affected by the coronavirus. So to talk about these stories and to talk about the issue writ large is Sal Masekela. Sal is a legend in the space. He's been in and around the action sports industry for years, from skate to surf to snowboarding. And he's also an avid environmentalist and speaking out with us at WSL Pure, with Surfrider Foundation, and more. And so I'm really, really excited to bring this conversation to you. Even though we live a couple blocks away from each other, we still physically distanced and held it over Zoom. And we went deep, we went long, but I think it's an important discussion. And I really encourage you to tune in to hear what Sal has to say. And I hope you enjoy the conversation with Sal Masekela. So Sal, how you doing, man? How are you doing in all of this? It's good to see your face, even though you live 2 blocks away.
Likewise, neighbor. Literally 2 blocks away. I'm maintaining, man. It's been a very interesting mental, emotional, spiritual, physical journey. This is the longest that I've been home in 20 years, and I make my living and my life from exploration and curiosity outside of my zip code, area code, or any code. Like, that's just how I've lived since I graduated high school. So this is the first pause, or the first time I've ever been really put on timeout.
Adult timeout
since I was a kid. And especially like a timeout where you're watching, how you feel doesn't really matter in comparison to the thing that is taking place and the manner in which it is affecting millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people at the same time, if not billions of people at the same time, really. And it's the first shared global experience that has taken place in our lifetimes, where literally we're all tangibly affected. And when I talk to my family in South Africa or my friends in Australia, we're all having the same conversations, and it's a trip. But to answer your question, I am doing well. I have had peaks and valleys. And presently, I'm on a nice even keel.
That's good, man. And it's been like a solid 2 months. We're about 2 months into this, or like, I mean, quarantine in the US. I'm hitting 60 days today, I think it is, that I started actually isolating.
I flew home. I flew home from the job I was doing in Atlanta on March 13th, and I have been in this position since then.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up the whole sort of we're all feeling this thing together at the same time. Because there's certainly been crises before in our lifetimes, but not on this scale. I feel like, it just hasn't been, like 9/11 and certain other events have been, Fukushima and things like that. They've been big, but this is one that just everyone everywhere is like, oh, at some point this is coming to our country, it's coming to our neighborhood. And I think that's really interesting. And that's, part of what we talk about on the show is just that interconnectedness. Like we use the ocean as sort of our vehicle and our medium to say we're all connected to our one ocean. And so this is one of those things where it's like, all right, how are we? We are all truly connected to each other, to the things we do, the way we travel, the way we engage in our communities. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because I think what's, fascinating about COVID-19 is the unfortunate ways in which it's showing us the problems that already exist. It's like exacerbating the problems. And so one of which is environmental justice and, equity, and whether that is about access to the ocean or it's about the way that the virus itself is affecting Black and brown people and communities. It's kind of just taking those disparities and just like making them even worse. And so I thought that was what we could riff on today. There were a couple articles out recently about, environmental justice, the way that it's affecting people. So let's riff on that a little bit. But like before we jump into that, you mentioned your career has been in and around just being out and being curious. To more specifically get into it for anyone who may not know you, there might be a couple.
That's a lot of people. So.
But I mean, you are a storyteller, creator, producer, journalist. You've been the voice essentially of action sports for decades now. Skate, surf. You started back at Transworld. You were at ESPN, X Games. You've been in surf, skate, snowboard. You've been all over the place. You did stuff with Vice. I mean, I've got my teammate John put together a list of kind of like your backstory, and it was like, I was like, dude, let me give the cliff notes, and he's like 30 bullet points. It's like blah blah. Oh, by the way, dropped an album a couple years ago. It's really good. You're one of the co-founders of Stoked Mentoring, which gets underprivileged youth out into skating and surfing and snowboarding. The Lunchbox Fund, nonprofit in South Africa. You've done stuff with Tony Hawk. Surfers Not Street Children. I mean, truly, like you've been engaged in so much stuff. How do you define you?
That's a really great question. I see myself as being a storyteller.
So I got it right off the start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because a lot of times people ask me what I do, and it's like, well, I use a bunch of different mediums and verticals and platforms to engage in storytelling, and that's been commentating, acting as a play-by-play announcer or a host within the action sports stream for almost 20 years, but at the same time, being a musician and making music with my band Alakazam, which is Masekela backwards, as well as going out and doing more investigative style journalism and storytelling in a more documentary form, like I've gotten to do with Vice and on the show that we did together, Vice World of Sports. And even now, what I do with Red Bull Media House is a continuation of how I think people knew me via X Games and stuff that I did with the ASP, and I've gotten to do with the WSL as well. But really being able to support what I love about what we do with the Red Bull Signature Series is really being able to support and commentate on premier events within each of the specialties across the spectrum of action sports, that really hold the core values of what each sport is about. So, we get to do the Vulcan Pipe Pro, which is such a special event on the North Shore, but at the same time, a few months before, I'll be in Zion, Utah, doing the Red Bull Rampage free ride mountain biking event. and all sorts of things in between. But yeah, just relentlessly curious, and somehow convinced a bunch of people that they should help sponsor the curiosity.
Oh, do you also share that sort of imposter syndrome of like, how did I convince these people to let me go do this stuff?
I do. I mean, maybe it's imposter syndrome, but mixed in with, I think, just an incredible amount. The longer that I get to do it, the more that I appreciate what I get to do, and that I've gotten to do it for as long as I have.
Totally.
Because every day in my inbox is either an email or a direct message from a kid somewhere halfway around the world is like, how do I do what you do? And I've been in college for journalism for this long, or I've been a communications major this long. Like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you because I didn't do any of those things. So yeah, I definitely suffer from a healthy bit of imposter syndrome that continues to force me to want to really show up and try to continue to do my best and grow in the thing that I do, because you never have it figured out.
Right. I totally agree. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, anyone who tells you this is the way that life works is lying or just doesn't know better. Like, it's just, we're all figuring it out. I think it's interesting too that you mentioned doing the work. Anyone who follows you on Instagram sees that you are not afraid to do work, at least physically, and I have to expect that translates to the mental and to the professional work side of things. You are like beast mode at Deuce Gym down the street, and even in quarantine, you've been beast mode doing like some stupid number of squats or lunges or God knows what exercise. And I'm like, I always watch it. And I'm like, should I do that? I was like, I'm gonna go run a couple miles. I'm cool with that. I did get a weight vest though. That's been my like.
There you go. So you if that encouraged you to put yourself under a little bit of tension doing the thing, even better. And that's what I say to people all the time. Like, they're like, I can't do what you do. Like, you could. It is a choice, but I don't tell people to do what I do. The thing that I always say in any of my posts is, this is just an encouragement for you to find a way to keep moving. Because what I've learned about myself in the last 10 years is learning how to move outside of just surfing and snowboarding and skateboarding, but really learning how to move my body has not only helped support those things that I love doing, that as I get older, I can't just rely on natural ability, but it has also helped fuel my drive to continue to be passionate about going out in the field and working. I work better and perform better since I've taken fitness and made it not something I have to do, but a part of my reality of my existence and who I am, which I used to do it begrudgingly. And now if I'm not doing it, I'm not happy.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember seeing you post about like doing all your leg days so that you could be ready for powder days, so you can get up and get out on the mountain. It's like, and that enables you to keep that curiosity and keep that connection to nature. And so I do want to kind of transition into all of that, but there's one final sort of thing, because this is a podcast, and some people will consume this podcast via this video production that we're doing, this high production that we're doing in my living room.
Very high.
But some people are just going to listen. And so, one important point, Sal, is, you are an African American in this world of action sports. And, I think it'd be remiss to not hit on that. And you've been very, vocal about that and what that looks like. And we're speaking, a week after everything that happened with, Ahmaud, or continues to happen with Ahmaud Arbery. And, it is, it's trying times out there. There's been a ton of progress, but it also feels like there's been no progress whatsoever in that movement. And, I don't know. I just feel like we have to at least mention that, and mention that not only have you been in and around this industry for a long time, but you've been one of the only, in a lot of situations. And that's really powerful, that, you've had experiences that none of us could ever imagine having, I'm sure. And just, I don't know, I just want to recognize that off the bat before we get into all this.
I appreciate that. And it's interesting. I never got into this, even when I started as a kid, it wasn't because I was like, ooh, I could be the only person that looks like me in that space.
That doesn't feel like a strong motivator, honestly. Like,
No.
oh, I want to go be the only guy.
Yeah. Hey, where can I be the only person where I constantly have to explain the fact that, just because we share the passion of doing the same thing doesn't mean that we don't have different experiences walking through our journeys in this country. And I didn't really talk about it much in the very beginning years until I was really forced to, just because I was blown away at how a lot of times my audience would be so taken back or offended at the notion that I might have a different experience as a Black man in America, even though we both surf and snowboard. And people's main thing that they always want to say to me is like, "Hey, man, we're all just riding waves and riding the mountains, bro. You don't have to bring that stuff into it." And I'm always like, well, I would love to wake up every day without ever having to talk about race. Please understand. None of us wake up in the morning and go, I really hope that I could just get to shine a light on some injustice today. That's going to feel really good. Because it's just not, it's not a thing. And as I think people have started to realize how traditionally closed off our industries, the action sports industry has been towards people who are other in many different ways, whether it be from choice of sexuality, gender, race, etc. As people are finally realizing, like, oh, it is pretty much just us in here. That's strange. I never really realized it. I think we've finally gotten to a place where people are willing to have the conversation without being so offended or feeling like someone like myself, by pointing out what's happening, is saying, I'm saying that you are a racist and a perpetrator of these racist ideologies. No, but you might unknowingly be participating because of maybe having a lack of awareness of how other people experience this country. So I don't know. It's our little world is a nice lens into what the real expansion and acknowledgement of diversity really can look like, and the ways in which other people are affected differently in how they lead their life. And something as simple as like the act of play and access to spaces that people have taken for granted within their own families for generations, it's very hard for them to comprehend that it is not the same level of ease to participate in the thing for different types of people, and in this case, especially people of color.
That's a fantastic point, and I'm going to leverage that as a segue into sort of the stories in the relation to COVID-19. So Friday night, I spent some time on the phone with some friends talking about the potential beach openings here in LA. Some friends from Surfrider LA, et cetera, right? Because the beaches have been closed here still. LA County beaches have been closed. Now, closed, what does that actually mean? Because people have still been surfing, right? People are still going out there. People don't care. And like that, even that alone is probably one of those things where I could probably go out and surf and get out and have no problem. That might be different for you, right? I mean, that might actually be a different scenario for you as a Black surfer, right? Whereas cops might be more likely to be like, oh, what's this guy doing or whatever. There was a recent issue of a woman walking her dog on the beach, and she was Black and she didn't comply. And so then, of course, it turned into a thing. So now
we're talking. Yeah. I saw that on a beach where clearly everybody was doing the same thing. And this woman happened to be the person who stood out. And when I saw it, I wasn't shocked. I knew what that feeling was of having to justify why you're doing what everyone else is doing when other people don't look like you.
Right.
And as far as surfing is concerned, I haven't chosen to. There's been an unspoken thing that's been happening in Venice the last few weeks, where the police have been in a kind of don't ask, we'll look the other way, as well as the lifeguards if you're out of the water by 8 or so in the morning. Generally speaking, is what it's been the last few weeks, and I thought that was really, really cool. I haven't chosen to challenge it just because, or to be a part of it, just because I'm like, I don't know if I want to like have an incident. And also too, there's been this idea that like, yes, we live close to the beach, but I'm of the thought that it doesn't make it necessarily ours, and that people who come from other places, when they come to the beach, they're coming to the beach for a real escape getaway from situations, environments that none of us that live here can comprehend, because we don't go to have experiences in their neighborhoods in the way that they come to ours.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about Friday night. Was like, okay, the beaches are going to be open, but the parking lots are going to be closed, and it's going to be a keep it moving policy. So what happens to that family, that Latino family, that black family, any family, poor family who lives inland a couple hours, wants to get out of their house, right? Because they're probably living in a tougher situation anyway. They want to get out of their house. They want to get to the coast. They can't park. They can't sit down. How do you enjoy a day at the beach? How do you enjoy that as a family? And is that equitable access?
And that's as this thing moves forward, there's going to have to be some modification in how that looks like. And I believe, like, if I was sitting at a round table of a city council, I would be like, okay, well, we're not going to be able to keep the parking lots closed forever. We're not going to be able to close off access forever. How do we educate the public, like, at a real grand level, so that when they come to the beach, it's going to be a different experience that they had before. But if we take these steps, these are the manners in which we can enjoy the beaches, enjoy social distancing, and also not overly impact the community that you're coming to visit. Like, what does that conversation look like? To me, seems like the better way than just this light switch with no dimmer that only benefits the people that live here.
Yeah.
That being said, the gills are very, very dry, and I hear that
I hear you, man.
I have had one session in the 8 weeks. I did take a drive, early morning dawn patrol drive, to a place I will not disclose that had access, and I got a 2-hour session in, and I got all emotional about it, and I've had that in my backpack. But it sounds like that we're going to get access this Wednesday, and I will take advantage of it. But I do think that there's a larger conversation to be had.
Yeah, we just got to be careful about how we do it, because otherwise it's going to go right back down to closing it down, and maybe even worse. And we got to figure out how to give access to people who don't have it. I mean, again, these communities, black, brown communities, who they live there not necessarily by choice. It's kind of, this is the system that has given them that opportunity, or that's the only option, or that's where they've grown up. And so, to highlight one of them, just to get to a couple of the stories, I do want to move through a couple of them. This first one is talking about how in Massachusetts, the Boston Globe reporting through MSN, Massachusetts communities with dirty air are coronavirus hotspots. And I think the fascinating thing around this is how intricately linked coronavirus directly is to air pollution. If your lungs are at risk from breathing in air pollution, then you are at greater risk for COVID-19 to affect you, and that traditionally affects our underserved communities.
Yeah, I mean, at a time when we have, from an administration standpoint, all the deregulation on Earth taking place, especially in the manufacturing sector. As you mentioned, disproportionately, those areas that are sort of where industry goes out to serve the rest of the country, disproportionately, the people who live in those areas that are taking the brunt of the pollution that is created from those industries, those are poor people. And most of those people in those groups are black and brown people. And that usually has to do with air and water, which are the two things that if you live in a suburban neighborhood, you take for granted 100%. And then on top of that, right, usually those people who are breathing in a inordinate amount of bad air or drinking bad water usually live in situations where even their interior of where they live is affected, don't have good ventilation, etc. A lot of people living on top of each other. There's all the things that are created already via their poverty, the poverty line that they exist in, and not having access to good medical, etc., It's like a perfect tinderbox. Like this, the way that I like to explain COVID-19 to people who want to say it's not a thing is like, yo, this is a black light. This is a black light in a college dorm room. Turn out the lights, switch on the black light, and nothing is able to hide. Like disgusting things that you don't want to see that really don't work about how you're living. That's what this thing is. And it's like, it's funny. And it's also, I know, like,
it's really scary, but it is a funny analogy. I'm sorry.
It's the only analogy that people get, because they're like, oh, that's disgusting. And I'm like, yes, it is disgusting. And it is disgusting how we as a society like continue to have these like really antiquated forms of operating systems that only serve a small amount of people. And if you're not affected by it, if you're not affected by these antiquated systems that serve a small amount of people, it's very easy for you to get defensive about virtue signaling and all these other things that you can't comprehend. And it might even cause you to take yourself out onto the street and hold up a big sign that says, hey, what I'm experiencing right now in this isolation quarantine is equitable to slavery, and I want out. Which is like what's really happening on these streets of Southern California. I saw the sign today and watched the woman explain in her version of justified terms how, you know, this what's happening and being put down forth from the governor in her sign was equal to slavery. And she felt proud, like she was making some sort of a point.
She's very profound. I mean, I'm sure she was very proud when she wrote that sign and was like, I've got it. It's like slavery. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, it took ridiculous. The time to make the sign by hand.
Yeah.
And, you know, those things that you mentioned at the outset, you know, the numbers in Massachusetts, I think there was one town that had something insane like 5,000 and change per 100,000. If we had those numbers here in Southern California, Los Angeles County, this ish would be locked all the way down, and we would be in crazy crisis. Like we're very uncomfortable right now, but we would be in like crises. But because it's happening to poor people of color, it's easy to say like, well, that's not happening to me here. That's happening there. That has nothing to do with me. I want to get my hair done, or I want to go surf, or whatever.
Yeah, I saw. It's funny you mentioned the getting the hair done and the different signs and the protests. A friend of mine shared a post of like a couple white people with signs that say "We demand haircuts," and then it was compared to a sign from a black woman, "Stop killing us." You know, please stop killing us. Which is like, it's just crazy how out of whack it is.
It's really out of whack, and even the manner of exploitation of the things in our system that already don't work, like bad policing that usually disproportionately affects poor people and black and brown people. If you look at what was happening in New York City, you know, a couple of weeks ago, when, you know, you had white people as far as the eye could see in Central Park clearly not honoring social distancing, and the police walking around and handing out masks to people like, hey, excuse me there, I can see that you guys are enjoying a little bit of our spring sunshine. Can I hand you this mask? Just, you know, you don't have to move or anything. But then in the streets, you know, especially in black and Latino neighborhoods, like black people were being attacked and tackled and beaten and arrested by like what looked like rogue super cops because for quote, not enduring safe distancing, but clearly like opportunism, you know, at its core. And like this is normal things that you would see in a regular situation, but because everyone's attention is fixated in the way that it is now on the same thing, people are like, oh, well, that has to be a one-off. Like, no, it's not a one-off.
Yeah, no, this happens all the time. And I mean, it's just, again, going back to the sort of equitable access issue, which is something, again, you've been a part of for a long time, working with Stoked and, you know, getting kids out and getting them access to things that they wouldn't otherwise have. You have parks in areas that are predominantly white that are open, and you have parks in predominantly black neighborhoods that are predominantly closed. And the disparity is just atrocious because Here you have densely packed neighborhoods, as you highlighted. People just want to get outside and hang on the stoop or hang in their local park or, go shoot some hoops or whatever it is, and like just be out in whatever they have at the local playground. Sometimes the playground is the only thing that's available as some public space in a neighborhood in New York City, having lived there for years, and they're just like, nope, shut down. But then let's keep Chelsea open, let's keep Central Park open, stuff like that. So it's inequitable access, and it drives me insane to see it. I can only imagine how it makes you feel, right? It's just so frustrating, right? And then think about that connection back to the environment. So again, going back to these, Black and brown communities that are traditionally, impoverished, that's where there's still oil drilling, right? That's where they're often put next to plants or farms that are off-gassing or releasing methane into the air. That like there's so much bad that happens in these neighborhoods. And one really good one that I would recommend you check out. We had Michael Doshi on the show last week talking about the story of plastic. Great documentary that goes into truly, the end of the line and the communities that are affected by the various sort of environmental injustices that happen. And it's a great one just to highlight, it's not just about single-use plastic ending up on a beach. It's about the people who live next to the oil refinery who are breathing in, toxic air all the time. And so it's pretty frustrating.
And to your point at the start, it's like what's really insidious about these types of these type of situations is that if you can't see it, it's not really a thing. And even for the people who live within these situations, they can't see it. They're just trying to live. It's not a thing until it hits them with some unsuspecting health situation. And suddenly it's like, well, why do so many people in my family battle asthma? Like from jump, why are we dealing with these rare different types of blood disorders? And why are there elevated, lead content in our blood? Oh, because we're still living in places where they let that slide in our paint, all these things, so that when you do have a COVID-19 that comes along and you hear people talk about like, oh, well, we just have to worry about old people and like people who have predispositions to having some bad things that are happening within their medical care. Like, we don't really think of young able-bodied people because we're not used to that in a lot of neighborhoods in America. But like, in these type of areas where you describe, like these are normal things, and these are why we're seeing like this crazy wave. I mean, you look at a place like Louisiana or areas in Michigan where like people of color represent 13, 14, 30% of the population, but they're accounting for 60-70% of the cases of COVID. And the mortality rate, and are the leaders for mortality from the thing. And some people want to be like, well, there's no correlation there. I'll sit and wait for what reason you might think that is. We have all day. And then you go even further into the mindset for a lot of people, and the talking points on the other side is like, well, those people have got to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, like my family did. Well, was your family told that they can't get a loan to live in this certain neighborhood because of their skin color, even though they have good credit and they've got money? Like, were certain areas redlined so that banks wouldn't give loans? Like,
the New York Times 1619 podcast series was epic on that.
Yeah, it was really epic, and it really ticked off a lot of people that like a bunch of stuff that like they refused to teach us in high school was put out so succinctly in a way where people had to be like, well, no, that's a lie. Like, I don't think people realize that, like I said before, like, I don't want to drive looking in the rearview mirror all day. It's not fun. But if the rear view mirror is clearer in many ways than the lens that's put in front of us, especially since there is such a crazy like cross shot of disinformation and misinformation meant to keep us guessing. But if you look behind it, how we got here, there's no lie there. And it's only accepting how we are where we are today that we get to move forward. And the only possibility for positivity that I can see coming out of what we're in right now is this willingness as a society to figure out, like, okay, what are we abandoning? What are we abandoning that hasn't been working? And what are the new systems that can possibly work for more people? Just to have basic, just to get the goal of basic equality should not be a call into, like, it shouldn't be an anti-American notion.
No, not at all. I mean, it's supposed to be written into the Constitution or whatever, but that's a whole other discussion of what the framers, as we now call them, had in mind when they were writing that. But I mean, you're absolutely right. We need to figure out what we stand for in this movement, and that is why I think this has shown a lot of us that there is an opportunity for change, and a lot of people in the environmental movement are like, hey, this is where we all need to all be in this together. This is not just about saving some certain species or whatever it is. This is like, hey, this is an environmental justice issue across the board. We need to recognize the way climate change is affecting all of us, because now you look at, I love that. I posted it recently, that comic from The Economist of coronavirus punching us, kind of like fighting, and then climate change is sitting on the sidelines like waiting, like Juggernaut or whatever, just like ready to knock us out. Because the reality is like that just affects everything across the board. And that's why, we need to address everything as an environmental justice issue and think about everyone. I mean, you talk about, we're in a world in which, the average American, or let's start with, the average global citizen has a carbon footprint somewhere under a couple tons of metric tons of CO2 per year, right? Depending on what continent you're on, it's anywhere from 4 down to less than half a ton. Whereas the average American's carbon footprint per year is 20 tons, right? And growing. And it's just our rate of consumption is insane. And the reality is that when all of this hits, it's going to hit those poor communities, those poor countries, those low-lying countries, those sub-Saharan African countries, all along the Caribbean, et cetera. All of them are going to get annihilated first. It's going to get hotter. It's going to spread disease more quickly. It's going to make it unlivable. And, meanwhile, we'll be here like turning on the AC more. That's what really gets at me about all of this, is like, these are connected because we need everyone in this and need to think about everyone together, because we need everyone to act together to potentially solve this thing.
Yeah. And it's all, like you said, it's all 100% interlinked. And for a very long time, I think people of affluence, and especially just Americans in general, there's American exceptionalism prior to COVID-19 was like a infinity stone that everybody had access to. Just be like, hey, what's that special power you walk around with? It's American exceptionalism. Literally nothing can touch me. If it's happening over there, it's happening over there. But I'm in the greatest country in the world. I'm also an American. It gives me a superpower, and I can't control that, because this is where I am. I'm in the best country in the world. It's not happening to me. It can't happen to me. And we've gotten to benefit from that through so many different things that have touched the rest of the planet, including war, where we literally just watch war like a Twitch video game channel in a way that affects other people. And now here we are, and it's like, oh, we're in the game with COVID. Like, we are in the game in the same way that it's happening to everyone else. And for a lot of people's brains, Reece, like, it is literally tripping out their operating system that was cloaked in this idea that being American is all that you need to be. Like, that's my identity. I can go out and consume and do whatever I want to because that's my superpower. And now that's not a power, and it scares. I can see why a lot of people stand on the street and look as ignorant as they do and sound as ignorant as they do, because they literally believe that that's all you need to be. And while it is in a fantastic country that I am proud to have been born in, and that I do tirelessly also hope can get better, I feel sorry for my fellow Americans who have been raised to think, or have been convinced that that's all you need, and now are just confused that we're all being affected as a whole. And you can only hope that there's some sort of opportunity for a wake up, in that these small boxes, these identity teams, that you've built yourself into. Well, I'm a conservative. Okay, how's that working out for you in this thing? We're both isolated in our homes, confused and figuring out how we're going to take care of our families. You got something better than that? I'm a conservative, or I'm a uber liberal, or whatever it is. Like, those identifying markers are like, they're cute, but at this point, like, when they put it on your tombstone, are people going to care?
Yeah.
I don't.
Not. We're all just scared humans.
I don't think so. And we're watching like this really interesting fear marination, and everybody's acting out as a result of fear. Those people who are walking around with guns on their backs during this thing to make their statement are shit scared. They're just as shit scared as the person who's sitting at home counting their money and figuring out, like, but just a different expression of what the fear looks like. But it's
for sure.
It's all fear.
And that's it's I love that you touch on fear, because I feel like fear is what is driving so much of the inequity and the challenge of solving the climate crisis. It's this fear of the zero-sum game of, we have to give up in order for us to, in order for them to survive, or whatever it is. And I recently finished reading a great book, The Future We Choose, which is written by some of the leaders of the UN climate talks. And they talk about how we need to think with an abundance mindset of, if we can move towards renewables and not live in this world where it's like, oh, I got to keep mine, like it's just mine. And if I give you some, that means I have less. It's like, no, hang on. We can create systems that create abundance. Nature actually naturally tries to create abundance, and so it's a great read, and it kind of flips the mindset of this, oh God, what's going to happen? It's like, no, hang on, let's create these systems and these better systems, and let's be inclusive in that process. And I'm gonna not dig too deep into the article, because I feel like we've touched on it a ton. But the article from Grist was, coronavirus is not just a health crisis, it's an environmental justice crisis. And I really encourage people to read it, because it does touch on this connection that we all have, which is, this is not just about, some people losing their lives, and it's not just about a health medical issue. It's like, it is highlighting the worst injustices of environmental justice, and it's something that we need to fix.
It really is. And it also shows how used to and okay with environmental justice we are as a society. Because here we are now, despite this level of impact that we're all aware of. And there's a strong amount of people out there, not the majority, but a strong amount of people out there who have gotten to the point where they're like, oh, wait, that shit's happening mostly to them? Well, let me get back to my life and take my risks, because I'm an American and it's my right. And they are not my fellow Americans, so I don't have to have an empathy to them. Now, if we were seeing those type of numbers in the other neighborhoods, you tell me how quick people would be marching off if they didn't have the safety of privilege to want to just be like, you know what, let's just go for it. Everything will be fine.
It may end up happening, honestly, with the behavior that's going on out there, and the lack of distancing, and the potential for a second wave. It may end up happening eventually. And so it'll be a stark contrast, I'm sure. I want to get to some questions from some of our fans. Sal. Sorry, you got one more?
I just want to say, I don't wish that.
No, not at all.
In any way, shape, or form. I'm not sitting here scratching my hands hoping like, ooh, I just hope that's what happens. I want it to not be the case more than anything.
I would love to be. I would love for all climate scientists to be proven wrong, and for climate change to not be such a real thing. And I would love for all the medical experts to be proven wrong, and for coronavirus to go away.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Epidemiology to be and virology to be proven as a lie and the biggest sort of scam degree that you could ever get.
It'd be great if all of that was totally wrong, and everyone could go back to their lives and be healthy. Yes. Unfortunately, I think they're right, and it's here to stay for a while. All right, let's get to some questions, because we had some good questions. I hate to push things along, because I could do this all day with you, but we did have some good ones. These are like heavier questions than the usual questions from fans, I guess because of the topic and or because of you. So where do you see, this one's from Cliff Capono, who I would assume you know Cliff at this point, but great surfer. You don't?
I don't physically know him, but I'm just a massive fan of him and what he stands for at a cultural level, science level, environment level. Like, I'm also blown away that Cliff Capono has a question for me, so hopefully I don't mess it up.
His question is, where do you see the role of indigenous knowledge in the current environmental crisis?
Woo!
He brought it.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that instantly brings to mind is if you look globally at indigenous knowledge, those communities, those cultures, the core tenets of the indigenous knowledge is direct relationship and communing with the environment. Like, nothing happens without taking the environment into place and making decisions accordingly, in the manner in which that could be from the manner of toiling land to even the manner in which animals are killed for food, etc. Like, all of it, like, if you look at the totality of indigenous cultures around the world, for the most part, built into relationship and the cycles of how the earth works, so that they don't mess up the balance.
It's often said that the Hawaiian culture was like one of the most sustainable cultures before, we showed up and ruined it.
Yeah, like they really had things worked out, and we came with the boats and the ships and the disease, etc. And we're like, no, we need to take all of this and not even worry about it. And that's the thing. Man gets a real hard on for being at the top of the chain, but not being a part of the cycle. And I don't care what people think. Like, we are a very small fraction in a cycle. And if our continued mindset as a society and culture of humanity is dominance, that we run shit, then I don't know. It's not looking like it's going to work out.
It's not.
So to answer Cliff's question, I mean, imagine if modern societies at the highest end of technology worked with indigenous cultural mindset and figured out how we use all this crazy high vibration science and technology to help implement these things that worked for thousands and thousands of years before we kind of lost the plot. What would that dance look like?
Yeah. Actually be a team in solving things.
Yeah, be like some Wakanda-esque, if you will. Like a Wakandish type of global vibe.
I want to live in Wakanda. Can I? Is that cool?
I can talk. I can see if we can't get you a visa to visit.
It looked like an amazing place.
Incredible place.
Okay, moving on before we delve too far into the comic universe. From Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, a nonprofit partner, incredible group. Thoughts on the protest to end stay-at-home orders early and reopen Hawaii to tourists? That's different than the California question.
Far different question, and a great question. All right, Hawaii is a chain of islands, right? So everyone who's there is sort of they're isolated already as they are, and the bulk of how the Hawaiian island chain sustains itself is via tourists. Today, specifically, 115 or so visitors landed in Hawaii. I think the stats were for yesterday. People that went to visit the islands.
Did you get the questions beforehand? How do you have that stat on hand?
I'm going to explain to you why I know this. I know you're like, who are you? I did not get the questions beforehand.
My teammate John clearly gave you the questions ahead of time.
He did not. He did not give me the. I'm going to tell you how I know this. On average, on a day like today, upwards of 33,000 people would visit and land in Hawaii, to the state of Hawaii, and disperse amongst all of its islands to stay in hotels and to participate in being tourists in Hawaii. So while Hawaii isn't experiencing the caseloads and death, what they're experiencing at an economic level because of this thing that we take for granted, thousands of planes coming in and out every day that sustain their economy, the long-term effects of this are very, very real. I mean, hotels are shut down on the North Shore that a lot of people that are familiar with listening to, like, there's no bodies inside of the Turtle Bay.
Yeah. Empty.
It's empty. You know, they just opened Lele's last week for takeout. And the reason why I know that number, by the way, is because I was on the phone with Billy Kemper earlier today, who was back home working on recovery from his injuries.
Yeah.
And just came back here to do some more rehab.
Gotcha.
And we were having that conversation.
Okay. That's some good pre-production there, I was going to say.
So to answer the question, yeah, that's like a ticking time bomb as far as the long-term effects of what an island nation like Hawaii could be dealing with.
Yeah. All right. So I've got a couple more very similar in different locations. So from Surfrider LA, the good people at Surfrider Los Angeles, great chapter. How does Sal feel about beach reopenings that are inherently exclusionary, and how should we address nouveau localism in the age of COVID? Which we kind of touched on, but we didn't actually get to what you think should necessarily clearly be a safe plan moving forward. And then under the gun, very last minute, another question in from a friend of mine in Rockaway, my friend Jimbo on the Moon, as he goes on social media, but says, seems like people are surfing now more than ever. You got a bunch of people who are not working. It's a great way to let off steam in the middle of a quarantine. It's also overcrowding the beaches at a time when, you know, seals are hauling out, migratory birds are nesting, blah, blah, blah. How can we better educate surfers on this matter? I see surfers as some of the best potential stewards, but also some of the worst offenders when it comes to respecting the ecosystems we rely on for recreation. So it's kind of like, I don't know, what do you think is the ideal plan moving forward in places like LA and Rockaway Beach, you know, urban beaches that have a lot of people nearby, but need to do so?
Well, to answer the first question, I think you probably saw the post that I put up on Instagram a couple weeks ago.
But maybe share.
It was a sarcastic monologue piece about having that I know nothing about surfing. And the reason why I said that is because I was so blown away that we were like, I didn't think we were going to be on the front lines of demanding that we get to do our thing in the midst of a pandemic. I didn't think people were going to so instantly take an affront and, you know, make it a conspiracy against them specifically. And a lot of people within the surf community were not stoked. They were like, "Who do you think you are, bro?" Da, 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 da. I was like, "Hey, just a point of view." To answer the question about what I think about, I think we already touched on it. That, yeah, I think surfing is a great activity. I think people should be able to do it as we open up, etc. But I do think we're going to have to figure out a way for people to be able to enjoy the beach safely and educate what social distancing really means and what it looks like when people are outdoors until shit is under control. That's it. But again, if, like I said before, if it's just like a light switch without a dimmer, and we're not really figuring out how to educate the masses in what that is, then we're going to end up in a situation like we were 5 weeks ago, where after we had all those rains, all of inland came like it was July 4th, and everything got shut down for everybody. I'll never forget, it was a Saturday, and it was traffic backed up on across the 10, and I was like, oh, we're done. Like, you know, there was the Temescal Canyon looked like the Rose Bowl. And I was like, oh, this is, it's about to be a wrap. And sure enough, that Monday, it was a wrap. As far as surfers being stewards of the environment, I think that our beloved sport lifestyle, culture, unfortunately, is selfish at its absolute core. And I think many people would be surprised how few actual surfers are members of Surfrider organization or patrons of WSL Pure, etc. For a lot of surfers, especially in Southern California, the idea that like they need to be a part of also the solution outside of like, this is the place I get to hang out and do my thing and rip, there's a disconnect. There is a massive disconnect. And for some reason, we've been unable to figure out how to make it sexy for people to be down with taking care of the thing, of the place and the thing that they love so much. Now, am I making a generalization? Yes, there are a lot of people who are advocates for it. But amongst the general population, it's not part of our lead conversation. It's just not a thing. And that's always been sort of a conservative nature of surfing in general. Even when you look at like the resistance to changes in design, etc., like surfers don't like to change or do anything that like, wait, is it going to get in the way of how much or how I get to do the thing the way I do it right now? I'm not really for that. So it's going to take work.
The thing that we do that is like almost inherently pointless and non-essential and
completely like it's not essential for everyone else.
To quote Yvon Chouinard, right, founder of Patagonia, conquerors of the useless, right? Like mountain climbing. Like, what did you do? You climbed up a thing. What does that actually contribute to society in any real way? No. You conquered the useless, right? Same thing. Like we conquer waves, and it's great. Yeah. It's amazing. I hope surfers don't take me the wrong way there, but I'm also just trying to say, like, for people to say that surfing is essential, I'm like,
it is. I think it's essential in that. I mean, it's healthy as can be. I mean, you can commune, you can leave stress behind. I mean, there's so many benefits of it. Can you get it from other places? Yes, maybe not in as cool a manner. You have to like try to figure out how to chase the feeling in a different way, but it is transferable. And I think that if surfers truly appreciated the fact that like I'm getting to achieve feelings that other people are getting in lots of different other ways, but they'll never have this experience. And if they cherished the experience, like truly cherish the fact that this is a unique experience that you can only get here, and that it is a privilege as opposed to like my right, that maybe people would want to chip in and really make that a part of the conversation right off the get-go. Like, you learn to surf, also here's how you learn to take care of this thing.
Yeah.
So that we can all be stewards of the entirety of what the culture is. And the culture being the environment that we're in first. Like, without the environment, there is no culture. There is no ripping. There is no I'm cooler than this person or any of those other things that come out from it. Like, if you're not a steward of the culture, you're barely participating in the thing.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's helped me get over this whole feeling of, not being able to surf, because I haven't surfed at all since I started to isolate or whatever. It's just that like there will be waves. There will be more waves.
Yeah.
There will continue to be waves long after this. And that keeps me going. It's like eventually I'll get back to it, and it's going to be great when we do. All right. I got a couple more that I want to bang through. Earth Technologies, Rye Harris, he had to have a question. And of course. Any suggestions for not using single-use plastic bags now that, all the bag bans have kind of been undone? And similarly, B.A. Suhar, thoughts on tackling single-use plastic, especially in younger generations? How do you look at that as a kind of environmental justice issue?
Well, for instance, right off the bat, just like teaching people that the simple tasks that they go to purchase food and small items, just like have a bag with you, have a reusable bag. It's so much easier than dealing with the paper bag thing anyway. I think banning single-use plastic bags in stores and in commerce is something that should have happened a long time ago at a national level. I mean, it's cool to see other countries that are quote unquote behind us economically that are doing that already.
Yeah.
But we're all victims of it. I mean, I try my best to get, trash bags for my house that are biodegradable, et cetera, but they're far more expensive. And I'm trying to get better at composting, et cetera. But again, figuring out how if you teach it young and make it as cool and as normal as like washing hands and saying thank you, then it's not a burden. It's just a thing that we do. I think for your last guest, I sent in a question because I don't know the answer to this, and I wasn't smart in school, and I'm still not smart in adult life. But I do know that plastics.
I'll call you on that, but okay.
I do know that plastics are naturally occurring. Like everyone forgets that plastic comes from organic materials.
Right.
So my question is, is there a way that we're able to manufacture biodegradable plastics in general so that this has to be stopped? It feels like this is going to be a horrible analogy. Please don't judge me for this. But it's like people that sell certain types of recreational narcotics that they put other things in them to make the life last longer. Plastics, if I'm wrong, at their base are not a bad thing, but all the other things that they put in them to make them stretch and last longer to be able to make more of it or make them stronger, etc., is what ends up being our landfill issue.
It's really, so it's, yes, technically all matter is like natural, and we only have the amount of matter. I can't get into the physics of it and destruction of matter sort of conversation.
You just took such a deep breath, by the way. You just took such a deep breath to be like, really, Sal? That's the question that you asked against the question?
No, I did ask your question to Doshi, and okay. I do think we addressed it in the episode. And the big thing is like what they do. It's the way that they change those polymers or make polymers out of them, and they make them to be indestructible. And the challenge is that, plastic isn't inherently bad. It's the way in which we treat it. And, making an indestructible polymer that is meant to last 1,000 years for a thing that we use for a minute or less seems a little bit out of whack. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And then the other challenge is that there are many, many different types of polymers. Those numbers, those recycling numbers, the 1 through 7 on all the things you see. Well, there's 1 through 7. Only really 1s and 2s are getting recycled these days, and even that is questionable in many cases. And number 7 is a catch-all for all the other types. So the system is set up to be, there's all these different types, and unfortunately, we don't really have a great system for any of them, and so that's the reality. If we only made a few different polymer types, and we're very strict about which ones we made and how we use them and how we recycled them, we probably wouldn't be in the mess we're in now. All right, a couple more questions to kind of bring it home. One from Colin, who gave you the nickname Kudu?
That's really funny. Well, that would be Colin.
Yeah. Oh, really? He's the one who gave you the nickname? He set himself up to get called out?
He set himself up, yeah.
So Colin is a legend in
South Africa.
South African surfing. Works with the WSL, but he asked me to ask you this question. I was like, all right.
Yeah, that was a self-promotional question because all last year in Bolito and at Jeffreys Bay, they greeted me as Kudu.
I love it. Okay, so I'm gonna bucket a couple questions together. One that I've had throughout this whole thing, and a couple others here. So, Insta Sam Bennett, good dude. What does a better tomorrow look like? And then another one from Taylor Lane. How do you see surfing in the industry in the next 3 to 5 years or sooner, embodying a more inclusionary ethos socially and environmentally? And then I'm going to tack on mine, which is just like, how can we be better allies? How can I, as a white dude out in the surf, how can I be a better ally to, black and brown friends around the world and to that community? How... What advice do you have? For the person who wonders, because there are probably a lot of people who want to be better but don't know what to do because it's weird and it's race and it's like, and then people just walk away.
I would say to the people who get outraged when they see things happening, who get sad, but don't feel like they can use their voice to actually speak out on certain things and make people within their circle aware of what's happening to others. We need those people to step up, because that's what allyship looks like. Your post the other day where you explained why you chose to go on the run for Ahmaud Arbery, I was like, oh man, thank you, Reece, because I can do it. And a certain amount of people are going to jump in my mentions. And I had someone tell me that they were going to unfollow me because a few people tell me they were unfollowing because I was clearly decidedly racist at this point. You doing it, people have to stop, look, and wonder and be like, huh, maybe I should pay attention. It shouldn't be that way, but that is what it is. I would encourage people to get information and follow people and platforms that really explain where the imbalances lie within our society and the different manners in which certain groups of people are disadvantaged, and where those disadvantages stem from at a systematic level in our institutions, and figure out ways to get involved. How to get involved and get educated, and then in turn use your voice to amplify. Because if you're having those if you're someone who doesn't look like me, but you feel strongly about these situations, and you're having those conversations with others, and those friends are having conversations with others, and now we care about these things the way we care about everything else, then we have an actual chance for things to change. Within the surfing community, I say to people all the time, like, hey, there was such crazy resistance to the Brazilian storm, because for years, Brazilians in surfing, it was an allowed, accepted, and expected amount of racism and xenophobia when it came to how we poked fun at Brazilians, Brazilian culture, and their broken English, and the fact that they're so passionate in the water. We're never going to have to worry about them because they're never actually going to they're never going to matter. They might be there, but they're not going to matter. And
now look what we have.
Italo,
Gabby, Felipe. I mean, so many good surfers. How cool.
Defining what progression looks like, and now everyone having to accept and being curious and wanting to get to know. And you can argue that Italo is probably going to be the greatest vehicle for that, because he sort of let down the fear guard of the language barrier and is like, I'm here for all of it. And that's just a sample, I believe, of what's coming in the bigger sort of identity of what surf culture is going to look like globally. And for very many years, it was just accepted that, like, if you wanted to surf, you want to do your best to emulate a Southern Californian look and lifestyle, or the South Coast of Australia, and then maybe we'll sprinkle in a little bit of like Hawaiian royalty novelty culture for legacy, but it's not the forefront. These are the things you want to emulate, and then you might want to go to this place to have this experience. And that was the totality of how people looked at surfing and beach culture, right? It's through that blonde-haired, blue-eyed lens.
Right.
And also, like, for the most part, like a very like white male, like demigod sort of deal. That's not the case anymore. We've seen the way women have risen through the ranks and are leading and driving performance at every single level. They fought and they've gotten their level of equality for their platform and stage, and the amount of progress that's taken place as a result is crazy. The progress that's taken place within Brazilian culture is crazy. And what's happening on the African continent, the largest continent surrounded by water, and the explosion of what the definition of surf culture is looking at, like in countries like Senegal and, and Mozambique and Namibia and South Africa, etc. Like, there's more storms coming, and it's going to be whether or not, like, we as a surf culture are excited that, like, we're no longer going to be able to put a surfer in the box. Like, you're no longer going to be able to look at a person and their look and how they sound and be like, oh, that person rips. You look at the women from Textured Waves that have formulated their own platform to tell the stories of women of color that are like having this experience because no one wanted to acknowledge them. And certain people being like, well, you know, everyone just surf. Like, you don't have to talk about it. Well, if you're not used to seeing someone that looks like you doing the thing that you love, how are you going to how would that make you feel? And that's what I think is so exciting about the future of what surfing looks like, is that the future of surfing to me, and a better look at what our community looks like, is literally not being able to tell whether or not someone surfs well just by taking a look at them based on some antiquated ideas of what that's supposed to look like.
I love that, man. I'm lucky that no one's ever looked at me and thought that I rip. I've never been cursed with that stereotype. I hate that.
Can I ask you this?
What?
Has anyone ever looked at you when you told them that you surfed and they'd gone slack-jawed and asked you to explain how it is that you learned how to do the thing, because there's no way that you would be a surfer?
No, of course not.
That's happened to me.
I know.
Literally thousands of times, and continues to happen to me every day. And I don't want to have that conversation anymore. And neither do a whole host of other different types of people. It's just not a conversation we're desirous to have.
No, we need to move way beyond that. We had Eric Copeland on the podcast a long time ago, and he told that story of, you know, one day going out to go surf, and someone stopped him and saying like, "Hey, what are you doing?" You know, like clearly going surfing, like in a wetsuit with a surfboard. What do you think I'm doing, sir?
My favorite one is, "Hey, it's really great to see you out here." I always go, "It's great to see you out here too."
Amazing, man. But we're joking at the end of what you finished with, which was a very, you know, powerful sort of vision for the future, which is, having people in and around this sport that we love, that is so powerful and transformational for so many people, and, you know, shattering those stereotypes, which would be amazing. And, you know, going back to the story of having, you know, kids and young students write to you and say, "Hey, you know, how do I get to where you are?" or whatever it is. And, like, you know, we need more people, you know, black surfers, Asian surfers, female surfers. We need more of them to be that, you know, and to show that, so that there are more kids out there who get in on this. And that's what's really cool about what you're doing with Stoke.
Thank you. And I think we were joking around before that it's a pointless activity. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, I do believe that surfing can make people better human beings, and can give them can really change their outlook of what they're capable of in life. I've seen it with our students at Stoked. You know, for them, learning how to negotiate a new environment, learning how to feel safe, and tackle a new environment, falling down, getting back up, and conquering fear, etc., and making direct application into how to better your life from that it's crazy. And we've watched it with, you know, over 6,000 kids in the last 14 years, like huge difference making in their lives. And for people, I think, even who get surfing later in life, as a way to like expand their horizons. Like, I used to be of that school to be like, listen, if you haven't surfed after 17, like, it's just we don't really need you in the water. And I've fallen back from that, because I've seen the way it can change the outlook of someone's life if they've never had access to that level of freedom and being able to literally leave it all behind for that amount of time where your only job is to be present. Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, again, I'm glad that you went back to that point. I don't mean for people to think that I think that surfing is pointless.
No, we all get it.
As someone who works at the WSL, I think...
Hey, how did Reece lose his job? Oh, no, he said something about the thing that he does not really being a thing, and then we just never saw or heard from him again.
It's one of the best things that we can do. and it's an amazing activity, and I love it and miss it dearly. And I'm looking forward to getting back in the water, and I'm looking forward to getting back in the water with lots of different people from all over the place. That's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah.
I that's one of the things I value about surfing in general, is just getting out there and mixing it up with different people.
Yeah,
and we need more and more of that.
The connection is everything, and I have a global family, like a literal global family, as a result of this pointless thing. And those people are some of the most important humans who have helped to shape me as a person.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what that's kind of the whole point. Like I said, of the one ocean concept. It's like, hey, we're all in this thing together. We are all connected by our one shared ocean. We all owe every other breath we take to our one shared ocean. So we got to kind of be in this together and look out for each other. And that means everyone.
Yeah.
Every single person has to be seen and heard and understood.
Amen, sir.
Cool, man. Dude, so good to see you and catch up with you. Catch you on the next neighborhood walk, I suppose. Catch you doing sprints out somewhere, or like a stupid number of lunges.
20, if you ever want to join in the 20-minute lunges, 20 minutes of walking lunges, it takes place on Wednesdays. I occasionally do them on Instagram Live. People think I'm crazy, but you should see my bottom turn.
I love it. Thank you, Sal, for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing all your insight and knowledge, and for everything that you do. We're going to link to Stoked and a number of the different orgs that you've been a part of in the show notes. And yeah, man, I hope to give you a big hug in person sometime soon.
It's coming soon, man. Thank you. I have to say one note. My podcast is finally coming to life.
Is this cross promo? I didn't know we were doing cross promo. I'm stoked.
It's coming end of the month. It's called What Shapes Us.
I like it.
What Shapes Us with Sal Masekela. Strap in, folks. It's going to be interesting.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, we'll be certain to promo when that thing gets live.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, there's no podcast in the world. I figured I'd start one.
If I can have one, you can.
Whatever, man. I look forward to returning the favor. We'll switch roles.
Sounds good, dude. Thanks,
All
Sal.
right. Take care.
Later. Thank you so much to Sal for spending that time with us, and for just having a really open, honest conversation and dialogue. You can find Sal online at Sal Masekela on Instagram and on all the usual social media platforms. And you can also find Stoked.org online. I would definitely check out Stoked. They do incredible work. I've volunteered with them. I have many friends who have volunteered with them and work with them. I mean, just some really incredible people who are trying to use board sports to essentially close that opportunity gap. And so I think it's a really important org out there, and I encourage you to volunteer with them if you can. Of course, you can find us online at WSL Pure and at WSLPure.org, and you can find links to all the articles we discussed, the organizations we mentioned, in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate it. If you like this show, please throw us a rating, throw us a review. Helps the show grow, helps us find more people, helps us get on great guests like Sal. And, as the beaches reopen, please maintain physical distancing, get this right, think about ways that we can, really do this right and get equitable access to the beach and to the ocean so that we can all enjoy it, because it's a right for every single one of us. Cool. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Do you like that? Well, if so, subscribe over there and then watch more videos over there. And then tell us your favorite videos down there. It's a 3-step process. Do them all now.